David was sweating bullets. The air in the alien embassy was thick with the scent of strange flowers, and despite being a trained diplomat, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was horribly wrong. He adjusted his collar and glanced nervously at the alien woman standing before him, her eyes glowing with an intensity that made him even more uncomfortable. "Welcome to my home, human," she said, her voice both melodic and unnervingly direct. "You have come to represent your people, yes?" David forced a smile, nodding. "Yes, absolutely. I'm here to discuss peace, mutual respect, all the boring diplomatic stuff, you know." He hoped to sound casual, but the words came out with a hint of nervousness. He quickly moved to the main issue. "Look, I'm sure we can come to some agreement. We can talk about trade, security, maybe even some cultural exchanges." Her response was immediate, as if she had already made up her mind. "Trade is, yes, fine. But first we must breed." David blinked, his brain stalling for a split second. "What?" "You must breed with me now, human," she said with a matter-of-fact tone. "It is how we form bonds of peace. It is how your species and mine will connect for eternity." Her smile was wide, almost too wide, and it was clear she was expecting a completely different reaction from him. David's heart raced as he processed what she had just said. Hold on, I think there's been a misunderstanding," he stammered, shaking his head vigorously. "On Earth, we don't just breed to make peace. I mean, sure, we could talk about, mating customs, but—" She cut him off, her voice full of confusion. "But you are the chosen one, the one who came to forge peace, yes? Your body, it is ripe with potential." She seemed to consider something before continuing. "I have prepared for this moment my entire life. You will be my mate." David's eyes widened, and a bead of sweat slid down the back of his neck. "Look, I'm not your mate," he blurted out, throwing his hands up in a panic. "I'm here for diplomacy. For peace. And I'm pretty sure breeding isn't part of the process." Lyra, the alien woman, seemed unfazed. She tilted her head, as if trying to understand what he was saying. "But you are human. The humans, they bond by breeding. Is this not how your species creates alliances?" Her voice was tinged with genuine curiosity. "I have studied your kind, seen the ways of your people. You have mating rituals. The Earthlings, you do this to ensure peace, yes?" David was flabbergasted. He could hardly believe he was having this conversation. No, we do not. Not like that, anyway. I mean, sure, we date a lot, but—" He froze, trying to come up with some sort of convincing argument. "We have, different stages of getting to know each other. Like dinner or drinks, or even movies, none of those end with breeding." Lyra frowned, confused by the concept of dinner or movies. "Ah, I see. So, you do not believe in the mating rituals. But surely, you must understand the importance of breeding in creating unity." David was quickly running out of options. He needed to steer this conversation into less biologically intense waters. "Look, I don't mean to be rude, but I'm pretty sure there's some cultural misunderstanding here." He raised his hands in a placating gesture. "Maybe we can start with something a little more conventional? Like, a handshake?" Lyra's eyes twinkled with amusement. A human greeting ritual." She immediately extended her hand. David, in a daze, grasped her hand awkwardly, trying not to hyperventilate. But the moment he did, she pulled him closer, and her face grew serious. "Now, human," she said in a low, sultry voice. "Let us begin." David froze, his mouth dry. He tried to pull back, but her grip was firm, and she was stronger than she looked. What are you doing?" His voice cracked as he tried to backpedal, but his feet seemed to be glued to the floor. "You are mine, human," Lyra stated, her gaze intense. "You have come to me. You are my mate. There is no going back now." His mind raced, frantically searching for any way out of this bizarre situation. No, that's not, no, He nearly yelled, heart hammering in his chest. I came here to talk about peace. Lyra's face softened slightly, but her grip didn't loosen. I will make peace with you in every way, human. My species and yours, we shall bond in this way. Together. Okay, David said quickly, trying to think on his feet. He wasn't exactly ready to breed with this alien woman, but he needed to find a way to explain this all. Maybe he could use his charm to defuse the situation, stall long enough to get out of this predicament. Tell you what, maybe we can take it slow. Like a date? He winced as the words came out. What the hell was he doing? Lyra looked at him like he had just proposed the greatest thing on earth. A date, she repeated, as if tasting the word. Ah, yes. I understand now. You Earthlings, this is your way of mating, yes? David nearly choked on his own saliva. Sure. Yes. That is exactly how we do things, he said, faking confidence. I take you out, we, go to a restaurant, or a park, whatever. No breeding. Just, normal Earth things. Her smile widened. And then we mate? She asked eagerly, clearly not understanding the nuances of his proposal. Right. No. I mean, no. David groaned. Look, how about we? His mind raced, but he was stuck. The situation was getting worse. Desperation began to settle in, and David suddenly realized that no matter how much he flailed, he was going to have to take some drastic measures to convince Lyra that breeding was not part of human diplomacy. He needed to buy more time. And he needed to do it fast. Tell you what, David said, trying to sound calm. How about a movie night? David's mind was in overdrive, scrambling for any possible way out of this bizarre situation. He was a trained diplomat, sure, but this wasn't something that was covered in any of his training manuals. Nothing about alien mating rituals or forced bonding or whatever the hell this was. But somehow, the alien woman before him, Lyra, had already convinced herself that Earth's most renowned diplomat had come to her planet not for peace talks, but to solidify their intergalactic bond through breeding. His attempt at suggesting a date had apparently hit a nerve, though he wasn't sure it was the right kind of nerve. Lyra had practically brightened up at the idea, as if he just offered her a treasure chest. But now, as her eager eyes studied him with newfound fervor, he realized that this might not go quite as he intended. A movie night, David muttered, almost incredulously. Right. It's a human custom. You know, we watch a film. Together. We just, watch it and enjoy the film. And then, that's it. No breeding. He cringed at the last part of the sentence, as if the mere mention of it would undo his entire argument. Lyra cocked her head to one side, studying him. She said, seemingly considering the proposal. This is intriguing. A ritual where you sit, watch something on a screen, and then you do nothing? She sounded confused but still interested. David jumped at the chance to clarify. Exactly. No breeding involved, he repeated, perhaps with too much emphasis. We just enjoy the show. Bonding, in a way that doesn't require physical stuff. Lyra narrowed her eyes slightly. But this bonding is not the same? You do not mark your mate in this way? No, David said quickly. It's more about getting to know each other, It's all about mutual respect, shared experiences. No pressure. Lyra seemed to mull this over. I see, she murmured, her gaze growing more intense as she processed the concept. And this movie, what does it involve? What is the point of watching this film? Well, David began, rubbing the back of his neck nervously. It's usually about stories. People, adventures, drama. It's basically a way to escape reality for a bit. We laugh, we cry, we get scared, and sometimes, we even learn things. It's like a shared experience, a way to, form a connection through something non-physical. Lyra's eyes gleamed. That sounds pleasurable. But tell me, human, why would I need to sit and watch a film with you if we are already bonded? Her voice was becoming flirtatious again, and David's stomach flipped. Would it not be more efficient to simply mate? David's mind froze. This woman had the focus of a laser beam and the subtlety of a wrecking ball. He was treading on extremely thin ice, and there was no way he could explain Earth customs in a way that made sense to her. He needed something more creative, something that would show her that real human bonding didn't involve immediate physical contact. But how could he make her understand that? Well, he began, trying to think of something that would buy him more time. Sometimes movies have deep meanings. You see, it's not just about physical connection. It's about the emotional journey. You know, you watch something, and you feel something. Like sometimes people go through heartache in films and come out stronger, or they learn something new about themselves. Her eyes lit up again. Emotional connection, she exclaimed. So, watching this movie, it will make us stronger together, even if we do not mate. David nodded enthusiastically, seizing the opportunity. Exactly. It's like an emotional bond. He laughed nervously, trying to cover up his desperation. It's like going on a date, but without all the pressure of, well, you know, physical expectations. Lyra blinked slowly. This is fascinating, she said, clearly intrigued but still holding on to the idea of a physical connection. But human, if we are already bonded, emotionally, why do you resist mating? David's throat tightened, and he did his best to keep his voice steady. I'm not resisting anything. I'm just explaining that Earthlings don't start with physical connections. We build up to them. Slowly. Slowly? Lyra repeated, her voice now tinged with amusement. I think I understand. You are too shy to mate immediately, yes? So you delay it with this movie thing. David winced. Sure, yeah, that's one way of putting it. He had no idea if he was digging himself deeper or if he was actually starting to make some headway. Then let us begin, Lyra said, her tone now playful. I am ready for the film. And then, when it is over, we will mate, yes? David's heart sank. Hold on. That's not how this works, he said quickly. We need to, start small. So let's just try something basic first. Maybe, I don't know, a little conversation before we even think about watching a movie? He was grasping at straws, trying to regain control of the situation. Lyra crossed her arms, looking at him skeptically. What kind of conversation? David scrambled to come up with something plausible. Well, you know, just talking about life, about who we are. You know, where we're from. Things like that. Lyra raised an eyebrow. I know where you're from. You are a human. From Earth. You do not need to tell me this. She was practically smirking now, clearly having caught on to his ploy. But David wasn't going to back down just yet. Okay. You're right, you know where I'm from. But what about you? Where are you from? What's it like where you come from? Your planet? Your people? Lyra paused, thinking for a moment. She said. We are the Earthians. Our planet is lush with flora and fauna. It is a place of peace and unity, where all species are welcome. David nodded, trying to keep the conversation light and engaging. Sounds like a great place, he said, grinning slightly. Very peaceful. Lyra continued, growing animated as she spoke of her planet. Indeed, we are a peaceful people. But we require strength to maintain it. That is why you and I must bond. David swallowed hard. Right. The bond. So, what about your people? I mean, how do they handle relationships? Lyra's smile softened, and she leaned forward slightly, her voice lowering. We bond, and we breed. It is a natural process. But I would be willing to learn about your ways, human, if it pleases you. David's heart raced again. He couldn't believe this was happening. He had barely just gotten a grasp on this absurd conversation, and now he was actually talking about learning each other's ways. It was the weirdest diplomatic exchange he had ever been part of. Well, maybe we can start by just talking. We can take this slow, he said, trying to keep his composure. And maybe, after the movie, We'll figure things out. Slowly. He gave her a hopeful smile, praying that this time, he'd find a way to steer this conversation into safe territory. David's brain was on fire. Lyra's idea of diplomacy was more hands-on than he'd ever imagined. As she sat there, smiling at him like a cat who had just cornered its prey, he realized he was in way over his head. He had tried humor, charm, and Earth's best practices of patience, but now, as she leaned closer, those tactics felt increasingly futile. The idea of a movie night had been his attempt at a safe way to bridge the cultural gap, but the more he explained, the more certain it became that Lyra was more interested in, well, breeding than bonding over popcorn. But how could he back out? She was almost giddy with excitement. She'd been sold on Earth customs, or at least, her interpretation of them, so thoroughly that David feared any further attempts at explanation would make her think he wasn't just rejecting her, but rejecting everything. And that would end very poorly for both of them. So, when do we start? Lyra asked, her tone now more sultry than inquisitive. The change in her voice sent a chill down his spine. He had to act fast before things spiraled out of his control. You said, we can bond, but we need to take it slow, she added, mocking him playfully. Her grin grew wider. I do not mind waiting, but it is not fun for me, human. I prefer immediate action. David shifted uncomfortably in his seat, trying to gather his thoughts. Well, you see, he had to keep it together. He couldn't let panic take over. This is just how we do things on Earth. Relationships take time. It's not like how you're thinking. He fumbled for a second, before adding with what little confidence he could muster. We need to get to know each other first, right? Before. I already know you. Lyra interrupted, her voice low and seductive. I know that you're my chosen mate. And I'm already so very ready, human. Just one look at you, and I can tell, we will make the perfect pair. David felt like his world was collapsing in on him. How could he have been so wrong about her intentions? Every single word out of her mouth seemed like a step closer to disaster. Was this really happening? Trying to gain some ground, he cleared his throat. Lyra, I'm flattered. Truly. But you have to understand, on Earth, we don't decide those things so quickly. We go on dates. We talk. We get to know each other. There's a whole process. You can't just skip straight to, well, that. Lyra's eyes twinkled, and she leaned in a little closer. I understand, human, she purred, her voice dripping with innuendo. But why should we waste time with talking and dating when I already know I'm meant to be with you? She reached forward, her fingers grazing his arm lightly. You don't need to say more. I can tell by your body language. You want this as much as I do. David nearly jumped out of his chair. His mind raced. No, Lyra. That's not it at all. He struggled to find the right words, trying to steer the conversation back on track. It's just, I'm not ready for that. There's no pressure, okay? It's about, emotional connection. We get to know each other better, and then, after that, if things work out, we might go there. But we're not jumping straight to mating. That's not how we do it. Lyra looked at him, her expression unreadable for a moment. Then she cocked her head to one side, as if processing his words. You are saying we must talk before we mate? She asked, her voice still teasing, but now more thoughtful. But what if I don't like the talk? What if I just want to mate? Her lips curled into a mischievous smile. David could feel the blood rush to his face. She was relentless. He had to make a stand now, or things were going to escalate beyond his control. We can talk about it all day, but if you don't understand that Earthlings don't just mate the moment they meet someone, then how can we ever have a relationship? David said, doing his best to sound confident, even though his insides were a mess. It's about emotional connection first, then physical connection. You can't skip ahead. Emotional connection? Lyra raised an eyebrow. You mean, like how I feel when I look at you? She laughed softly, the sound almost predatory. Oh, human! I feel something all right. It's not just emotional. David quickly wiped his brow, realizing this conversation had taken a very awkward turn. How had he gotten here? How had she gotten here? Why was everything so complicated? This was supposed to be about diplomacy, not mating rituals. Look, he said, trying to rein in his mounting frustration. This is a cultural difference. On Earth, relationships aren't just about physical attraction. They're about respect, trust, and mutual understanding. It takes time to build that. Lyra seemed to consider this, though her eyes never left him. I respect you, she said simply, her voice still low. But you must understand that I am not used to waiting. I am not one for delays. She stood, her movements graceful and predatory. I have seen your kind, human. You are clever. You try to talk your way out of things. But in the end, she stepped closer, her breath warm on his skin. In the end, we both know what's going to happen. David swallowed, his mind racing for anything to defuse the situation before things went any further. Wait. We can still try the movie. Let's just, watch something first. No pressure. I promise. Just, no mating right away. No breeding. Let's just see how it goes. He chuckled nervously, hoping she'd take the bait. Lyra's eyes sparkled with amusement. So, now you want to try the movie? Very well, human. But you should know, I've already made my decision. You're mine, and once we watch this film of yours, I'll be expecting a lot more than just talk. She winked. I'm very patient, but not that patient. David sat back, staring at her, utterly speechless. The negotiation had failed. Every attempt at diplomacy had backfired. And now, he was caught in a cosmic game of cat and mouse with an alien who wasn't just interested in peace talks. She was interested in him. All of him star. He sighed, rubbing his temples. How had things gone so wrong so fast? But then again, maybe he'd known from the start that this mission was going to be anything but ordinary. Still, if he was going to make it out of this intact, he had to outwit Lyra. Maybe a little humor would help. David offered a tight smile. All right. Movie first. But let's just say, you're really pushing your luck here, Lyra. Her grin widened. We'll see, human. We'll see. David's mind was racing as Lyra led him to the strange viewing room. The alien technology was bizarre. Glowing screens floated in midair, seemingly defying the laws of physics. He'd been to multiple alien planets, but nothing compared to this. The whole experience felt surreal. He was about to watch a movie with an alien who, he still couldn't believe it, wanted to mate with him after barely a few hours of interaction. He could barely process the absurdity of the situation. How did this become his life? Lyra had a mischievous smile on her face as she sat beside him. She didn't seem to understand personal space in the same way humans did. Her presence was intoxicating, and the warmth of her body against his own was almost too much to handle. It was all part of the plan, wasn't it? She was trying to distract him, confuse him, make him forget his mission. But David couldn't afford to lose focus. He was here for peace, not whatever this was. So, human, Lyra began, her voice low and sultry as the movie started. What kind of entertainment do you enjoy on your planet? She leaned in closer, her breath warm against his ear. I do hope you didn't bring something too boring. David swallowed, trying to keep his composure. Oh, well, variety is key. We have comedies, dramas, thrillers, movies that make you laugh, cry, and think. He wasn't sure why he even bothered explaining. He wasn't here to teach her Earth cinema. But this whole situation had turned into some bizarre game, and for some reason, he felt like humor was his only weapon left. Lyra nodded, clearly eager for the movie to begin, but not enough to stop her hands from subtly tracing the edge of his arm. I've never seen Earth movies. But I have seen many interesting things in my travels. I'm quite open-minded, human. David chuckled nervously, praying that his ability to remain calm would survive this ordeal. Well, Earth movies are all about emotions, Feelings, connection, not just. He couldn't bring himself to finish the sentence. What was he even trying to say? That they were better than anything she had seen? But what if she thought he was just stalling, trying to delay the inevitable? Lyra smiled. Feelings? Oh, I feel plenty. I'm sure we'll both feel a lot after I make you mine, human. She tilted her head to one side, her gaze sharp and intense. I don't need a movie to tell me how I feel about you. I already know. David could hardly focus on the movie, with Lyra's words echoing in his mind. Her eyes had a dangerous glint to them, as though she was savoring every second of this. If there was one thing he knew about her, it was that she wasn't going to stop until she had what she wanted. And right now, what she wanted was him. As the movie began, David couldn't help but watch the screen in a daze. But Lyra was much more interested in him. Her hand subtly brushed against his leg, and his muscles tensed involuntarily. This was it. This was the moment when the line between diplomacy and disaster blurred into oblivion. How is it? Lyra asked softly, her lips barely an inch from his ear. Is this what Earth calls romance? She giggled as if she already knew the answer. David felt the heat rise in his cheeks. Well, yeah. It's a bit of a romantic comedy, actually. You know, about love and, how people connect over time. Oh, I see, Lyra said, her voice dripping with amusement. She shifted closer, her lips brushing against his skin as she whispered. But why wait for time when we can connect right now? David froze, the air suddenly feeling thick. His mind was screaming for him to think of a way out. His entire diplomatic career had led him to this point, negotiating peace with an alien race. And yet, here he was struggling to keep it together while an alien woman was actively trying to seduce him. Lyra had no concept of personal space. She was right in his face, her lips inches away from his own, and her gaze was full of mischief. You're trying to resist me, human, but I can feel it, she purred. I can feel your desire. You want me, don't you? David, to his utter horror, felt his pulse quicken. He couldn't lie. There was a part of him that was undeniably attracted to her. But that wasn't the point. The point was that he had a mission. He was here to broker peace, not to get tangled in intergalactic romance or forced mating rituals. Lyra, he managed to say, though his voice was shaky. This isn't how it works. You can't just demand that. We need time to build trust. Relationships are about. He was cut off as her fingers traced the line of his jaw, her touch soft but unyielding. You speak of trust, but all I hear is fear, human, she said, her voice a mix of humor and challenge. Are you afraid of me? She smirked. Don't be. I only want what is ours. David felt a knot form in his stomach. He had to stop this before it went too far. No, Lyra. It's not fear. It's respect. Respect for you, for us. I'm not afraid, but I need you to understand that humans don't work that way. There's no immediate attraction. No rushing things. Lyra paused, her eyes narrowing in thought. So you're saying you don't want me? She asked, a slight pout on her lips. David, suddenly feeling cornered, shook his head frantically. That's not what I meant. He threw his hands up in exasperation. I'm just saying it takes time. I'm not rejecting you. I'm not saying I don't want you. Hell, I don't even know what I want. But... Lyra smiled, cutting him off. That's better, she said softly. You don't need to know yet. But you will. And when you do, I'll be here. Her voice dropped an octave lower, sending a shiver down his spine. We'll be here together. David's heart raced. She wasn't just persistent, she was relentless. He wasn't sure what to do next. Her confidence was disarming, and for a moment, he almost felt like he was losing control over the situation. But he couldn't back down now. He wasn't here to give up. He had a mission, and no matter how distracting Lyra was, he had to keep it in mind. We'll see, Lyra, he said, his voice firm despite the whirlwind inside him. We'll see. The movie played on, but it was clear that neither of them was watching it anymore. The only thing they were focused on now was the tension that hung between them, thick with unspoken promises.